Hello, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So as usual, lots of great stuff to go over and what's going on in the world of real estate today. And I'd like to start out with the stats like I always do. Basically, the sales were 417 homes last week, and that was up from 296 the week before. So a couple of weeks ago, it was Thanksgiving. And so as a result of that, we were 2 days light, even though it was the end of the month. So we've bounced back just like I thought we would. The median price increased to $430,000, which is still hovering right around where we always kind of like to see it. The inventory increased only by 10 homes, which is good. So that means that the inventory is staying pretty constant at 8624. And the number of foreclosures was 2 for the week, and short sales were 2. So we used to be 0 all the time at those, but of the 417, there are 4 of them. And so that's, less than 1% in regards of the market that is some kind of distressed property officially. Now, there are other properties that might be distressed because they just need a lot of work and that kind of thing. But because they've gone through a short sale or the person doesn't have all the money to bring to the table is what a short sale is. We haven't talked about that for quite a while, and I'll probably go into that a little bit later in the show. But going down here, of those 417 houses, 43 of them were under 250, 32 between 250 and 300, 103 between 300 and 400, 86 between 4 and 5, 124 between 500 and a million, and 29 over a million. So it kind of shows you, that everything kind of hovers around that midpoint there, obviously, but there are properties on both sides that sell. The months of inventory, because of the number that sold this week, is at 4.77. So a normal market is considered between 4 and 6 months. So we're right there, but not necessarily in all categories. Under 250, we're at 3.34, 3.81, 250 to 300. Then we go right at 4 from 300 to 400, 5.62 from 500 to a million, and over a million, we're at 7.11. So basically what that means is in those higher price points, you might be sitting on the market a little bit longer than you do in the lower price points. And so everything is very local when it comes to real estate. So you really need to look at what is going on and figure out, what's going on in your neighborhood and how your house compares and where it's all going to go from there. Now, the final list to ask price ratio is a little bit down this week at 96.55. We've been pretty much at 97, 91.54 under 250. Then we go right up to 96.74 from 250 to 300. Then we're still at the 98s all the way up to the 500s, and they're at 96 and then 94 for the over a million. So in that sweet spot, there's pretty much selling, pretty close to asking price, but the fringes on the low side and the high side have a little bit more. And as you noticed, we had 7 months of inventory in the 500 plus. And so with those had a little bit more room in the asking price and everything in regards to what sold as well. So it all kind of enters in, but the strange thing to me is when we look at the condos, townhomes, and villas, even though there is a boatload of inventory there, like we're definitely in a buyer's market there, we also see that the other side of that coin is that even though we're in that situation, that they still sell pretty close to asking price except for the lower and the higher end. So the average days on the market overall is 80 days on the market. And so that's kind of what happens on the single family home. Now, looking at the condos, townhomes, and villas, there were 103 last week versus 73 the week before with only 3 days. The median price increased to 280. So 280 versus 430 for the single family homes. So quite a difference there when you're looking at that. But when you do go to get a loan, if you are on a condo versus a house, they are going to consider the condo fee or the HOA fee as something that's in your ratios. Years ago, they didn't do that, but they realized that they really need to, and so they are including that as well. Basically, when there weren't any short sales or foreclosures there, and the inventory decreased by 30, making it 4265. So the single family homes are at 8624, which there were 417 that sold. The condos, there's 4265, about half of that, and there were 103. So 417 versus 103. So you can see already just with that you know that there are a lot there. The inventory is a lot more, is a lot different than it is with the single family homes than it is with the condos, townhomes, and villas. Now, of those 103, 45 of them were under 250, 12 between 250 and 300, 27 between 3 and 4, 15 between 4 and 5, only 4 between 400 and 500 and a million that sold, and none over a million sold. So looking at the months of inventory here, so overall we're at 9.56, which obviously puts you in a buyer's market. So 8.72 under 250. Then we go to 12.96 for 250 to 300. So over a year. And that's based on the number that sold this week. Then 9 months, 7 months, 16 months, 500 to a million. And there are 20 on the market, but none of them sold this week that are over a million. So the asking list to ask price ratio is at 96.27. It's 94.3 under 250, so a lot more negotiating room. And then it's kind of hovering between 96 and 97 in all the other categories, and 95 days to contract. So basically, when you're looking at that, it's like I'm always saying almost every week that real estate is extremely local. So you can take this for an idea in regards to what's going on. But if your house isn't an average house, maybe it's, a little bit more or a little bit less, then you definitely have to look at the school district. You have to look at the neighborhood. You have to look at what's going on, the condition of your property, and all of that kind of thing. And it's like there's some automatic value methods that you're going to find, like what the Zillow's estimate, or if you go to realtor.com, it's going to give you a ballpark figure of what it thinks your house is worth and all of those kinds of things. But nothing can replace actually doing the work and going through and checking it out, just like an appraiser would when you're going to refinance or sell your house or something like that. You have to look at it with fresh eyes. You have to look at what's specifically going on in your neighborhood. Maybe it's just on your street. Maybe it's definitely in the school district and the zip code. But you have to definitely look at what's going on specifically there, because everything is a little bit different. And I was seeing something on the news earlier this week, and they were talking about AI facilities that were going to be built in some other state. I think it was Maryland or something. And people were saying that their Christmas trees were going to be going away, their tree farm, because of eminent domain. They were going to be taking it over and everything in order to do that. So they were just, upset about the situation in regards to what was happening and all of that kind of thing. So if something like that is going on in your neighborhood, that there's something new coming in, something new that's being developed, whether it's good or bad, it definitely could affect the ratios and the price that your property is worth. For example, with Epic Universe coming in that whole area around Sand Lake and, Kirkman and that whole area, and Universal Boulevard and all of those things, when you look around there, the improvements that have been made to that area of the town is incredible, and all of that. So that definitely affects the traffic. That affects definitely the property values and everything as well. And I think they've done a really good job in regards to making it all work and everything over there, and Destination Parkway that used to kind of end right there at Universal, goes all the way to John Young and everything now. So that's just on the south side of a couple of things that I noticed as I was driving around the other day. But basically, when it comes down to it, everything is extremely local in finding out, what's working, what's not, what people want, where they want to go, and all of those kinds of good things. So it's really important if you're buying or selling to pay attention to these things, and that's why I'm here to assist. But in order to get in touch with us, all you have to do is call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So one of the things that I was talking about in the last segment, I just mentioned a little bit, is short sales and foreclosures. There weren't any that sold last week in the condo market, but there were two each for foreclosures and short sales in the single family homes. And I know I was talking a few weeks ago to one of the buyers that I'm working with, and he said that he saw in the news that Orlando's foreclosures are up, like 200% or something like that. And so he said, hey, if you see a great foreclosure, let me know. So I went ahead and I went through and I told him, and I looked at what was going on, and I said, okay, in regards to how many foreclosures there's, I'm going to look again right now, that there are a total of 8,624 houses on the market. And basically the number of those houses that are on the market that are foreclosure or bank owned are 38 of the 8,624. So that is up probably 200%, maybe even more than that, than in the previous year, because there weren't any. And now there's a total of 38 on the market, and that's it. And when we're looking at short sales on the market in the single family homes, there's a few more. There's 86 out of 8,624. So that's 1%, I believe, is pretty close to that, and the other one is less than 0.5%. So basically, when you're looking at that, it isn't a high percentage of the market, but a lot of people are confused in them, wondering what they are and how they work and all of that kind of stuff. And back in the day, when they first kind of came on the radar for everybody, we in Orlando were up to, I want to say, about 37, 38, maybe even as high as 40% of the market with short sales or foreclosures. So when that was going on, obviously it definitely was a huge part of the market, and people had to learn really quickly in regards to, how to navigate through those waters and how it all works and all of that kind of stuff. The myth out there is that if you're getting a foreclosure or you're getting a short sale, that you're going to get a really, really good deal, that you're going to get, a bottom basement price and all of that kind of stuff. And basically, when the banks first started with this, 15, 20 years ago, when there was a glut of them, they may not have known 100%, what they were doing with that. They didn't know the market that well and all of that kind of stuff. And so there might have been a few instances where people got really good deals. I mean, with that high of a number, they obviously got really good in figuring out how to navigate those waters. And basically what they're doing is that they do sell those properties at market value. And they're going to act like a like a third party person, which is what they are. And they're definitely going to look at what's the best thing to do. Is it better to hold on to it, or is it better to cut and run? And they're more in the cut and run thing, but they're not going to do it to the point where it's going to hurt them, or that they're not going to maximize the money that they've got into it. So basically, when the way that the foreclosures work is that for the most part, they're putting them on the market at market value. Maybe they're, when they've gotten it back from the person and they've gone through it, usually takes a few months after it's been foreclosed before it hits the market. And basically, for the most part, what happens with them is that they put them on at market value. They might paint it or do a couple of things like that that's going to make it sell a little bit faster because they're business people. And so if they can justify that, hey, we're going to spend $500 and it's going to bring in an extra 5,000, then they're definitely going to do those kinds of things. They don't do much because they don't want to put more money into it, but they will do things that make sense. The other thing that they do is they test the market for price. And so what they're doing is they might start out a little bit high, but then they're going to continue to decrease the price until they get people buying that property. And so, what back in the day, what I would always advise my buyers to do is that we would be looking for it and we would see the pattern. There were different banks that would maybe decrease the price like every 2 weeks, some of them every 3 weeks. And the funny thing is that they were consistently doing it by the same amount of money. I'm going to reduce this house by 5,000, 10,000, whatever, it was very consistent. So kind of what we did as buyers is that we knew that the asset manager, the bank owns the property, and the people that are in control of that property only have a smidgen of room to negotiate. Their power in regards to how much they can take on it is limited, by the price. So they usually, for the most part, had 3 to 5% that they could play with, and that's it. So somebody comes in with an offer on a foreclosure house that is maybe 50% of what it's listed for. It's just going to be turned down because the person who is at the bank that can make that decision only has that 5% play. And so what we did with the buyers, and we still kind of follow this to this day, is we watch and see what's going on. And if they want that house and say that it's consistently gone down like every 2 weeks, $5,000, then what we're going to do is before it hits that $5,000, right at that same time, we're going to go in a little bit lower and already take the price cut plus our 3 to 5% or whatever. And so we're going to optimize getting that house before anybody else does when that price goes down to that price that these people wanted it. And so you can kind of play the game both ways, right? But what happens is that once the price gets to a certain point, which is like anything in life, that it would get to a certain point and it would go maybe months and there would be no offers or anything like that. And it looked like no activity on that house. And then all of a sudden 20 people want it. And because it got to a price that was attractive to everybody, it seemed like it was a great deal, and it was a great deal. And so everybody was going to go for it. And then they bid it back up a little bit. And so basically, if you look at the way that people price things out there now and they're testing price to see what's the best thing to do, that's what the banks do all day long. And so that's kind of, what the scoop is on a foreclosure property. And so, there isn't that much room that the people that are in charge can do it. And what they did originally when they started having these foreclosures back in 2007, 8, back in the day when we had the big glut of all of them here in Central Florida, is that what happened was that at first the banks were dealing directly with the realtors and all of that kind of stuff. And what they did is there was another layer that came in that were called asset managers, that are asset manager companies that are between the bank and the public, the realtors and then the general public and everything. So what happened is that those asset managers also needed to get paid. So that was included in that as well. But then the other side of the coin is it gave it another layer that definitely made sure that no one could come in there and undercut or anything like that, because the asset managers were judged on how many houses got closed, when they got sold, what their maximum percent that they brought in, and all of that kind of good stuff. So you can imagine, it's a business, right? And so that's what they were doing. So when they foreclosed those homes, they didn't want to keep them in their inventory, but they wanted to get the maximum amount of money. So when that part of the market was 40+%, then that was the market. So if you were out there selling your house and your house was in perfect condition, you owned it outright, all of that kind of stuff, you were competing with the banks. So the banks really set the market back in the day. Now, with the low number of properties, the bank is getting the advantage, just like, all the other sellers and everything out there, of getting the high side of the market, but they're not in control of it. But they still are testing price. They're testing to see what's the best thing for them and their people. And so that's just how the cookie crumbles and how it all works. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I was talking about foreclosures and kind of how it works, and that the bank is definitely testing price. So the bank is trying to get the most money that they can from any of those houses. They're always testing price, which is what they should do. It's what any good business would do, obviously. So that's kind of what, in a nutshell, what happens with the foreclosures is that the banks get them and they are, checking the market to see what they can do and how they can get the best. So if you're looking for a deal, you might get the best deal working with an independent person as opposed to a bank. There are all kinds of circumstances out there where people are looking for deals. And so basically, we have many ways. We have offers that we can get on any property, and so we can get you straight cash right away, and maybe it's not what you want, but we can get it for you. And then we also have market value offers that are right away as well. So we basically have the ability to do all of that as well. So if you're looking to sell quick, please feel free to give us a call, and we're more than happy to help you out with that. But basically, the point of the matter is that there are people all the time that are looking for deals. So they might be looking for situations where someone's estate owns the property, and that was the last person that was on the deed, and so that passed away. And so basically they're going, okay, we're here to, help you out, whoever the heirs are, to make sure that people get exactly, what they can, for the property and all of that kind of stuff. Many times the heirs are out of state, and so they're just going, I'm not sure what to do. So however you can help me, that's great. Whatever I need to do is a good plan in order to make things happen. And so they go ahead and they do that. And so basically, when it comes down to it, what I'm trying to say is that if you really want a deal, the foreclosure might not be the deal that you're looking for, but there are deals out there, and you just have to know how to source them and how to find them and stuff like that. And we do have many ways to figure that out and to help you out with that in order to make things happen. The bottom line is that they're usually, when people are selling a house, maybe yourself even, the reason that you're doing that is that there's some kind of a lifestyle change. Maybe it's a happy occasion that you're having, more kids. Maybe your kids are getting a little older and you feel like they need more room. Perhaps it's something that you need to, that you want to downsize because everybody's kind of spreading their wings and going their different ways. And maybe the kids are older and you decide, hey, it would be a lot better if we all lived together. I was working with a couple a few weeks ago, and basically the bottom line is that they're like, our kids are all pretty much out of high school now, in college, past college, all of that kind of good stuff. And we definitely want a place where they can come, and we want to hang out with each other. We like each other. We want to be together. And so with all of that, they just wanted to have a bigger place where everybody had their own space and they could do it. And so all of those things, definitely come together for people to figure out and do what they want to do. So that's basically in a nutshell, what happens with that. But if you are looking for a distressed property, that might be your best bet. But I want to talk about short sales now and how that works because that's different than a foreclosure. So what a short sale is described as is a situation where a person owes money to the bank, and if they were to go to the closing table to sell it at market value today, they would actually have to bring money to the table. So anybody that bought their house, I would say probably before 2021 is probably not in a short sale situation. Anybody who bought it maybe 22, 23, 24, because the market hasn't had any time and it's been very stable in the last 3 or 4 years. It hasn't increased, but it hasn't, so it might have decreased a little bit and you've got expenses to sell it and stuff. So you might not have that much equity in it. And so that is what's considered a short sale. So what happens in that case is that people put their house on the market. They cannot negotiate with the bank until they have a contract that somebody has said, hey, I want to buy this house and this is how much I want to buy it. So say, for example, you have a house, you bought it for $500,000. Now you've got an offer that somebody says they'll buy it for $400,000. Your loan is at $450,000. And so in order for you to get out of that deal, you're going to, with expenses and all that kind of stuff, you're going to have to maybe come up with 50, 60, 70,000 or whatever to, come to the closing table. And you're going, oh my gosh, how am I going to make that happen? That just doesn't, I'm not going to be able to do it. So what you do is you do a short sale. So that short sale, what happens with that is that, like I said, you get all of the paperwork and everything together, that you've marketed the property, you've gotten the best price on that house that you can get at this point in time. And if it continues to go this way, the chances are that you're not going to be able to hang on to it. And so the bank is going to possibly have to go through foreclosure with it or something like that. So you're trying to kind of beat the timeline and be the most responsible and all of that kind of stuff. So you're doing what they call a short sale. So what you're doing is you're going to the bank and you're saying, hey, Mr. Banker, I've got this offer. They've done an appraisal. We've tried to market it for more money. Nobody wanted to buy it for more money. And so as a result of that, this is the best that we're going to do. And so the bank then makes a decision and says, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll take this lower amount than what you owe on the loan, and we'll allow this new person to buy it. Now, it definitely has to be arm's length transaction, meaning that you can't know those people. It's not a deal that somebody's getting or anything like that. It's very much a third party that's buying that house that wants to do it. So in that short sale situation, though, the bank has the option of saying yes, no, or maybe. And basically, if they say no, they usually come back with a counter offer and say, but we will take this. Now, as a homeowner, you have to realize that what's going to happen with that is that there is a chance that somebody could come back on you later. You need to make sure that when you're doing all of this, that you've got everything figured out and you've checked with attorneys and all of that kind of stuff, that they may be able to come back to you to try to get that deficit sometime in the future. So you need to guard against that. And then the second thing that could happen is that you could potentially get a tax liability for the short sale because you didn't have the money for it and you benefited from that by not having to pay that debt back. So they might give you some kind of a 1099 that you have to go to your taxes. So when you're going through that process, the best thing to do is to get all of your ducks in a row and get everything all lined up. And then you get the experts behind you to make sure that you're well aware of everything that's happening out there so you know what's going on. So again, it comes into that if you're the buyer of that particular property, you're going to think, hey, I'm going to get a really good deal because they're upside down and the bank's not going to really know the value. No, the bank's pretty smart. They're business people. They know what they're doing. And so they're going to check it out and do the best that they can to make sure that it's market value. So we did do a short sale earlier this year, and it was somebody that had just bought it within the last year. It was a brand new property, and it was a situation where two people had bought it together, and then the one person moved away. The other one couldn't afford it on their own. And so unfortunately, that was the situation. So we did end up getting it through. The offer that came in was pretty much at market value, and the bank agreed. And so as a result of that, everything worked out the way that everybody wanted it to. It was the best possible situation. But basically, when it comes down to it, from my understanding, and this is 10-year-old stuff of what I'm telling you right now, is that what I had heard was that on an average short sale, the bank was taking a $30,000 hit for everything that had gone on. But that same property, if it went to foreclosure, they were taking a $60,000 hit. Now, that's just an example. Obviously, every house is different and all of that kind of thing. But I think that it came down to that they had a lot more attorney costs, court costs, all of those kinds of things that added up, that if they could do it on a short sale basis, it was in their best interest as well as the homeowners to be able to work things out before it got worse. And so if you are in that situation, we definitely can help you out on that, but it's always good to look at it to make sure that you're in that situation, because you might not be. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So basically, I wanted to continue on a little bit in regards to the whole distressed property thing and how it works and all of that. And even if you're a little bit short, you don't necessarily have to do a short sale, the most responsible thing to do. And if you do have the money, the bank is going to expect that you pay your debts. I did have a lady's house that I sold earlier this year as well, that she actually had gone through a divorce, and she ended up with the house. The husband was out of it. It was just her that was selling it. It was a new home when they had purchased it, and they had only purchased it a year earlier. The builder was still building in that particular development and offering, $20,000 towards closing costs, a 4.99 rate that people could get, and all of that kind of thing. And so she was concerned about how we were going to compete with that. So we did compete with that. We didn't have to offer the 4.99 rate. She had done a couple of upgrades to her house, which we were able to go ahead and market those successfully, like fencing in the backyard, and then also doing some things on the flooring and that she had spent some money on. And basically the bottom line is, when it was all said and done, she did have to bring about $20,000 to the closing table because of the market and what it was. But she had moved out, she had moved on. It was too far away for where she wanted to commute. She was actually back in Orlando, living there, as opposed to living, I think the house was in Haines City or something like that. So she was definitely, had moved on. So every month that went by, she was spending a couple thousand, maybe 3,000 or more every month just carrying that house. And she wasn't going to be able to get the amount in rent. And it was a chapter in her life that was over. So she just wanted to move on. So it was well worth the time, energy, and effort to just rip the Band-Aid off, have it gone, and all of that kind of good stuff. And she's very happy that she did. She was very happy with the results. And, we got the thing done in a couple of months between the time that we put it on the market and actually had it off of her books and all of that kind of stuff. And so she was ready to start saving again and moving on, and instead of, going in the hole. So she could afford where she was at in having both properties even without living in it. But it wasn't the ideal situation. So that's what I mean, what I had mentioned earlier about lifestyle changes, that we all run into things that happen in life, whether it's a health challenge or whether it's a happy situation or whatever. There's both good and bad that happen. And so as a result of that, there might be a situation where you would like to move or have a different housing situation. And so when that becomes the case, then you're looking at the market and seeing, what your options are and what your best practices are and what's the best thing to do. And that's absolutely the most responsible thing, I think, to do, is to look at the whole big picture. And, the thing that you have to realize is that in many times you're in this market or any market, maybe you're looking at it and you're going, okay, I'm going to have to bring $10,000 to the closing table because I just bought this house like 2 years ago. The market hasn't increased. I don't really have that much, equity and that kind of thing in it. But if I do bring this 5 or 10,000 to the table, I'm actually going to make it up on the other end, because I'm going to buy a house that I'm going to get an extra $10,000-$15,000 of equity in. And so I'm going to end up whole. And I just recently dealt with a client that we did that very thing. He had purchased this property a year ago and really was waiting for the rates to go down. They hadn't gone down yet. He was looking at refinancing. The situation was one of his daughters was going to be moving down here. His wife was moving down within the year from another state. And basically the bottom line is what happened is that his wife had a situation where if she stayed on her job for 4 more years, that she was going to get a huge payout, like somewhere around $500,000 or something like that. So it didn't make sense to quit her job and move down here quicker. And he's going back and forth, all that stuff, like every other weekend. They found some pretty reasonable rates that they're able to do that. His daughter decided to go to college in another state instead of Florida. And so he's sitting there with a house that's too big for what he wants, and he's spending more money than he wants to spend. So basically what he did is he went ahead and sold it. He took about a $3,000 or $4,000 loss, and then got into a property that he feels much more comfortable with, much happier in regards to the amount of money that he's spending. And it's something that he's going to, have until the rest of his family moves down here and all of that kind of good stuff, because they all want to be here. They come here as often as they can. But basically the bottom line is that that's what it is. So you have to weigh all those options out and look at what the situation is for you and your family, and what's your best situation, for going forward. And how do we make that work with the least pain, for you, whether it might be that you're willing to take a little bit less or you're willing to take a little bit more. And basically, one of the things that I'm going to leave you with today is that when you're looking at a house, the way that the market is today is that we have options that are just like a car. When you're going to buy a new car, you have a couple of options. You can go to those most of the car dealers that are out there, the little mom and pop ones and stuff like that. They don't take trade-ins. So you're going to go there and you might get a deal and you might not get, much of a warranty, or they sell you a warranty or whatever with it. But it's definitely not a place where you're going to be able to trade in a car. So how you get rid of your old car is completely up to you. If you're going to sell it on the street, Auto Trader, any of those, anything online, there's multitude of ways that you can do that. But basically, if you took your car to a dealer, and I know too, that I'm not going to get as much for that car as if I sold it myself. But for the convenience of not having to deal with, going to the DMV and doing the license plate with the new owners and taking care of the sales tax and all of those kinds of things, you do it for the convenience of turning it into the dealer. And that you might have gotten a little bit more if you've done something else. Well, you have to know that there are those same options today in housing, and we have all of them. So if you're looking for a solution just give us a call and we'll definitely help you out. But I'm out of time here today, so in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.